I know you're wondering if you'll ever catch up to the wealthy. Here's something that sounds like good news, but isn't. According to the Federal Reserve, the top 1% used to own over 38% of all wealth in America. That was back in 2016. Now, as of the second quarter of 2025, they own 31%. So wealth inequality got better, right? Not even close. Let me show you why this drop is actually meaningless and what it really means for your financial future. When you hear that the wealthiest Americans dropped from owning 38% to 31% of all wealth, that sounds like progress. 7 percentage points redistributed to everyone else. Here's what they don't tell you. According to the Federal Reserve's latest data from Q2 2025, the top 1% still holds over $51 trillion in net worth. 51.8 trillion. Let me put that in perspective. If you stacked $1 million in $100 bills, it would be about 4 feet tall. $1 billion would create a stack taller than the Statue of Liberty. $51 trillion would literally reach into outer space hundreds of times over, and that's just the top 1%. We're talking about roughly 1.3 million families out of 133 million households in America. Now let's talk about everyone else. The bottom 50% of Americans owns just 2.5% of all wealth. According to Federal Reserve data, that's actually worse than it was in 1989. Back then, the bottom half owned 3.5%. So while the top 1% dropped from their peak, the bottom half actually lost ground over the past 3 decades. While the wealthy got slightly less wealthy, you got even more broke. Here's the math that really matters. The top 1% didn't get poorer. They just got rich slightly slower. Their actual dollar amount kept growing. The economy expanded. The wealth pie got bigger. So even though they own a smaller slice percentage-wise, their actual slice in dollars is still massive and growing. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% saw their share shrink and their actual purchasing power barely grew. So if the top 1% dropped from 38 to 31%, where did that wealth go? Here's what actually happened. According to Federal Reserve data from Q2 2025, the top 1% owns just under 50% of all stocks and mutual funds in America, 49.9% to be exact. When the market crashes temporarily, they lose paper wealth. That's what caused some of the drop from the peak. But here's the game. Stock markets recover, and since they own half the stocks, they capture half the recovery. The bottom 50% of Americans owns just 1% of stocks and mutual funds, 1%. So when the market goes up, the wealthy get wealthier. When it crashes, everyone loses, but the wealthy have the cash to buy more assets at discount prices. Then when it recovers, they win again. You're not even playing the same game. But it gets even crazier. Within that top 1%, there's the top 0.1%, the ultra-wealthy. According to the Federal Reserve, these roughly 131,000 households own 13.9% of all wealth by themselves. That's nearly 1 out of every $7 in America, owned by 131,000 families. While the regular wealthy at the bottom of the 1% might have seen their share drop, the ultra-rich at the very top kept climbing. Here's what makes this system so rigged. The wealthy don't make money the way you do. You trade time for dollars. Work 40 hours, get paid for 40 hours. They own assets, stocks that pay dividends, real estate that generates rent, businesses that produce profits. According to Federal Reserve data, the vast majority of wealth for the bottom 90% comes from home equity. For the top 1%, it comes from financial assets, stocks, and private businesses. So when housing crashed in 2008, regular people got crushed. When the stock market boomed afterward, the wealthy got richer. Different games, different rules, different outcomes. The top 1% owns half the stocks. The bottom 50% owns 1%. This isn't about being smarter. It's about owning different things. You need to start owning assets that grow in value. Open a brokerage account. Buy index funds that own the entire market. Start with whatever you can afford. Even $100 a month matters. The difference between someone who invests consistently for 30 years versus someone who doesn't is literally millions of dollars. That's not motivation, that's compound interest. You cannot invest your way to wealth on minimum wage. According to Census Bureau data, median household income in 2025 is around $83,000. If you're making significantly less, your first priority isn't investing, it's getting your income up. Learn high-income skills. Switch jobs every 2 to 3 years for raises. Start a side business. The median worker who stays put gets tiny cost of living adjustments that don't beat inflation. The worker who moves strategically can jump income by 20 to 30% or more. The top 1% built $51 trillion over generations, not years. Generations. You're not going to catch them, but you can start your family's wealth journey. Where do you want to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? According to the math, someone who consistently saves and invests 15% of their income over 30 years will likely end up in a much better position than 90% of Americans. Not because they're special, because they played the long game. Look, the top 1% dropped from 38% to 31%. That sounds good until you realize they still own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. Over $50 trillion. The system didn't get fair. It barely changed. And the bottom half actually got worse off. But here's what you can do. Understand where you actually stand. Own the assets the wealthy own. Increase your income strategically. Think in decades, not days. The Federal Reserve data doesn't lie. The people who build wealth aren't the smartest or the luckiest. They're the ones who understand the game and play it consistently. Subscribe for the next video where I'll break down the exact net worth you need at every age to stay on track and the biggest wealth building mistakes that keep people stuck. This is Data Makes Sense. Math, not miracles.